Hello and welcome to the new episode of Around the World in 7 Days. I am Pooja Dwivedi and here to present you some stories related to important global events. In this segment, we shall analyze two international stories of the past week. First of all, we shall discuss about the recently held 5th BIMSTEC Summit and why does India perceive it as an alternative to SAARC. Secondly, we shall understand the reasons responsible for the ongoing crisis in Sri Lanka and how India can carve out a niche in it. The 5th BIMSTEC Summit was held in Colombo, Sri Lanka recently. However, this meeting was held virtually and this is the first time since 2018 that the member states of BIMSTEC have organized the summit. The summit was hosted by Sri Lanka, who is also the current chair of BIMSTEC. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also addressed the summit and it was emphasized in the summit that cooperation activities will take place in 7 pillars and each pillar will be led by one member state. Security is one of the 7 pillars. India will lead the security pillar. Under this, India will be responsible for cooperation on issues related to terrorism, international crime, disaster management, and energy. Bangladesh will lead trade and investment. Nepal will lead people-to-people contacts, and Sri Lanka will be responsible for cooperation in science, technology, and innovation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has announced a grant of Rs 7.6 crore for enhancing the BIMSTEC budget. It is aimed at strengthening the capacity of the BIMSTEC Secretariat. India has announced extending and expanding the scope of BIMSTEC scholarship program offered by the Nalanda International University. BIMSTEC came into existence about 25 years ago. However, the summit has been held only 5 times so far. On the other hand, BIMSTEC is being seen as an alternative to SAARC against the backdrop of deteriorating situation in South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. Therefore, today, we will discuss in detail about BIMSTEC. We will also try to understand the motives behind the foundation of BIMSTEC. We will also discuss reasons due to which BIMSTEC is being seen as an alternative to SAARC. Let's first of all discuss about BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC is an acronym for the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation. It is an organization for establishing cooperation in Bay of Bengal region. Hence, the states located adjacent to the Bay of Bengal are its members. BIMSTEC states are India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar and Thailand. The organization came into existence on 6th of June 1997. Through the Bangkok Declaration, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka and Thailand were its founding members. At the time, this group was named BIMSTEC-EC. Here, EC stood for Economic Cooperation. Later, Myanmar, Nepal and Bhutan joined the group. As a result, the name of the group was changed to BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC was established under the Look East policy of India, which was conceived during the tenure of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. Under this policy, BIMSTEC was established with the states adjoining the Bay of Bengal. Out of all member states, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Thailand and Myanmar have access to the Bay of Bengal. Nepal and Bhutan are landlocked states, but their port access is close to the Bay of Bengal. BIMSTEC is a collaborative organization which is aimed at promoting technological and economic cooperation between South and Southeast Asian countries. Cooperation in the area of trade, energy, tourism, fisheries, transport and technology were promoted in the early years of BIMSTEC. Later, the ambit of BIMSTEC also included agriculture, poverty eradication, terrorism, culture, public relations, public health, environment, and climate change. Now the question arises that how can BIMSTEC become an alternative to SAARC? It has been witnessed that SAARC has been facing several issues from the last few years. Tensions between India and Pakistan are the biggest reason behind these issues. Strained relations between these two countries have occasionally been responsible for the improper functioning of a forum like SAARC. India had boycotted the already scheduled SAARC summit in Islamabad after the Uri terror attacks in 2016. Rest of the member states also did not participate in the summit in support of India's stand. The SAARC summit has not been held since then. India also wants to isolate Pakistan due to its continuing misdemeanor. For this reason, India prefers BIMSTEC over SAARC. It makes sense as all the member states of SAARC are members of BIMSTEC, except Maldives, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Therefore, India's attempt to ostracize Pakistan strategically seems to be succeeding. But there are also some other reasons for preferring BIMSTEC over SAARC. Basically, all the SAARC member states are located in South Asia. However, BIMSTEC has members from both South and Southeast Asia. According to India, BIMSTEC acts as a bridge between South and Southeast Asia. Therefore, India is chalking out a strategy for enhancing connectivity with ASEAN countries through BIMSTEC. Myanmar and Thailand are quite crucial for connecting India with the southeastern regions. The enhanced connectivity is likely to boost India's trade. Moreover, India needs a regional organization whose member states are ideologically unanimous on the issue of terrorism and combating cross-border terrorism and extremism as well. The Kathmandu Declaration of the 4th Summit also made a commitment to combat cross-border terrorist activities. In addition, BIMSTEC has also become relevant to India in terms of strengthening regional cooperation, including poverty eradication, tourism as well as energy, climate change and disaster management. India's active participation in BIMSTEC is also expected to have a positive impact on India's Act East policy. India can also accelerate the development of its Northeast region by establishing multi-level relations with the BIMSTEC members. However, it is a challenging task for India to turn this plan into a reality. This is so because the condition of both SAARC and BIMSTEC has become almost identical. SAARC has been less active for the last 30 years. Although the SAARC summits have been organized at regular intervals, no concrete steps have ever been taken on the decisions taken during these summits. BIMSTEC also plans to meet every 2 years, but even after completing 25 years of its establishment, only 5 BIMSTEC summits have been held till now. The slow progress is hampering the development of BIMSTEC. Therefore, India should play the role of an informal leader in BIMSTEC and set an example for its practical commitments, as BIMSTEC is considered as an alternative to SAARC by India. India must not forget that though it is the most prominent member of BIMSTEC, it has been criticized for failing to provide a strong leadership in the organization. In short, the member states of BIMSTEC are looking up to India with a ray of hope. On the other hand, China is trying to establish its supremacy in South Asia through the Belt and Road Initiative and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. At the same time, China is also working on a strategy to create a rift between India and its neighboring countries. In such a situation, India must play an active role in BIMSTEC and it should keep its ties intact with its neighboring countries. It will enhance India's closeness with the neighboring countries as well as ASEAN countries that are upset with China. However, BIMSTEC can be a better option for India from various perspectives, but it remains to be seen whether India succeeds in keeping BIMSTEC intact or not. Now, you must have heard in the news that India's neighbor Sri Lanka is facing a huge crisis. You must have also heard that Sri Lanka is facing dire financial crisis and it is on the verge of bankruptcy. The Sri Lankan crisis has become so bad that its government is forced to impose an emergency in the country. According to the reports, the entire Sri Lankan Cabinet resigned recently. Moreover, the ruling coalition has even lost its majority in the Sri Lankan parliament. Although President Gotabaya Rajapaksa offered the opposition to join the government, the opposition has turned down the proposal. There are widespread protests going on in Sri Lanka against the government. Sri Lankans are demanding that the present government should be changed. Inflation in Sri Lanka has reached to a degree that expenditure of Sri Lankans has increased by 4 times. Sri Lankans are paying up to 100 rupees for drinking a cup of tea. The Sri Lankan government has been forced to deploy troops at petrol pumps amidst fuel shortage. Now the question arises that when inflation is so high in Sri Lanka, then why is there such a huge demand for petrol and diesel? Actually, the answer for the Sri Lankan crisis lies in the question itself. The Sri Lankan treasury has become empty. The foreign exchange reserves of Sri Lanka are slowly getting depleted. Sri Lanka is facing 2 major issues due to the depletion of foreign exchange reserves. The first problem is that Sri Lanka is unable to import sufficient essential goods from abroad. Therefore, there is a shortage of diesel and petrol in Sri Lanka, and people are forced to queue up at the petrol pumps. The Sri Lankan army has been deployed at petrol pumps to prevent violence. The second obstacle is that Sri Lanka is unable to repay its foreign debts due to the lack of foreign exchange. According to media reports, Sri Lanka does not have sufficient foreign exchange reserves for repaying its debt. In such a situation, Sri Lanka is on the verge of bankruptcy. Let's suppose you have to purchase an item and you do not have enough money. Yet, you purchase that item by borrowing a loan. But when the time comes to repay the loan, then you fail to repay that loan because you still do not have enough money with you. In such a scenario, the lender can seize your assets. Such a situation is known as bankruptcy. Although India has extended a helping hand towards Sri Lanka, the question remains that whether India's aid will be sufficient for saving Sri Lanka from bankruptcy. According to reports, China has refused to provide aid to Sri Lanka. So, we will discuss the Sri Lankan crisis in today's story. We will try to understand how the Sri Lankan crisis will affect India. We will also discuss that how the Sri Lankan crisis has opened opportunities for India. Let us first of all try to understand the importance of foreign exchange. Actually, having sufficient foreign exchange in the economy of any country is quite crucial from several perspectives. If a country does not have sufficient foreign exchange, then it will not be in a position to import any goods from abroad. Suppose India has to import oil. Then India is required to have dollar reserves. Oil-producing countries will refuse to provide oil for a longer duration if a country does not have dollar reserves. Obviously, it will disturb the country's production and it will directly affect the government's revenue. Same scenario has happened in the case of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been facing 2 types of crises since last decade. One is the fiscal deficit and the other is the trade deficit. These deficits are the main cause of depletion of Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserve. Basically, international trade takes place in the global currency. The same global currency is used for importing or exporting any foreign good. At present, the US dollar is considered as a global currency. The US dollar accounts for 64% of the foreign exchange reserves held by the central banks around the world, and it accords the US dollar the status of a global currency. About 85% of the world's total trade is carried out in dollars. Moreover, the transaction of international loans is also held in dollars. Hence, Sri Lanka is neither able to import goods nor it is able to repay its debt. Sri Lanka has borrowed excessive loans for developing infrastructure in the country. Hambantota Port and Colombo Port were developed by utilizing loans borrowed from the foreign countries. However, the Sri Lankan government could not earn enough from the investment made in these projects. As a result, Sri Lankan debts increased extensively. Now the lender is asking Sri Lanka to repay the loans, but Sri Lanka is unable to do the same. Actually, China is the biggest lender to Sri Lanka. According to reports, Sri Lanka has a debt of about $45 billion. China has lent about $8 billion out of the total debt to Sri Lanka. It means that China's share in Sri Lanka's debt is about 1/6 of the total debt. It has been said that Sri Lanka has only $2.3 billion in foreign exchange reserves. According to Amsterdam-based think tank European Foundation for South Asian Studies, Sri Lanka has to repay $7 billion in 2022, including $1 billion in sovereign bonds. It implies that Sri Lanka requires about $4.7 billion for repaying its debt. It is a different issue that how Sri Lanka will arrange the amount required for importing other essential goods. However, India has sent aid to Sri Lanka several times over the past few months. The then Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka, G.L. Paris, was on a 3-day visit to Delhi in February 2022. Later, the then Finance Minister of Sri Lanka, Basil Rajapaksa, also visited India in March 2022. India has offered financial help during Basil Rajapaksa's visit, and it also provided the same. According to a report, India has given $2.4 billion to Sri Lanka since the beginning of 2022. This amount is almost half of the remaining debt of Sri Lanka. But experts also believe that Sri Lanka will need extensive financial help to come out of this deep financial crisis. Sri Lanka needs major aid from organizations like the International Monetary Fund for recovering from the ongoing financial crisis. India is trying its best to help Sri Lanka, but the question remains that for how long India can aid Sri Lanka. However, the Sri Lankan crisis is nothing less than an opportunity for India. China has always been a challenge for India in an island country like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's relations with India have been volatile due to the increasing Chinese activities in Sri Lanka over the past few years. On one hand, China has been creating a rift in India-Sri Lankan relations, and on the other hand, it has also been posing a strategic challenge to India in the Indian Ocean. Therefore, before China comes forward to resolve the Sri Lankan crisis, India should provide sufficient aid to Sri Lanka, and it should try to make Sri Lanka believe that India is a friend in need. It has often been witnessed that whenever any crisis arises in Sri Lanka, then Sri Lankans start migrating to India. They enter Tamil Nadu via the Indian Ocean. When Sri Lanka was facing civil war about a decade ago, then also Sri Lankans had migrated to India in large numbers. Several reports are coming to the fore that Sri Lankans are once again migrating to India amid the ongoing crises. Such migration puts more burden to India's resources, and as a result, the government gets worried. If the Sri Lankan crisis does not resolve soon, then the pace of migration in India might accelerate. However, it remains to be seen when the Sri Lankan crisis will be resolved and when the political and economic situation in Sri Lanka will return to normalcy. After the major news, let us also know about some other important international news. Russian soldiers have massacred civilians in Bucha, a city located adjacent to the Ukrainian capital Kiev. Ukraine's defense ministry has claimed in a Facebook post that the Russian army shot civilians in their head with their hands tied. The Ukrainian government claims that more than 300 civilians have lost their lives. According to the 1949 Geneva Convention, civilians should not be targeted during war. If civilians are targeted during war, then it will be considered a war crime. War crime-related cases are heard in the International Criminal Court, which is headquartered in The Hague, Netherlands. North Korea has warned South Korea of a nuclear attack. North Korea President Kim Jong-un's sister has warned that if South Korea attacks North Korea, then it will retaliate with a nuclear attack. Tensions between the two countries escalated recently when North Korea tested the banned intercontinental ballistic missile Hwasong-17. South Korea as well as Japan also expressed concerns over the missile test. Intercontinental ballistic missile is a long-range missile and it has a minimum range of about 5,500 kilometers. After Sri Lanka, there are reports of upheaval in the South American country of Peru. Due to severe inflation, violent protests have been reported in several cities, including the capital Lima, as fuel and fertilizer prices have skyrocketed in Peru. President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, has announced curfew in Lima and Callao city as the situation in these areas went beyond control. Actually, President Castillo has failed to control the rising inflation in Peru. It has been tried to impeach him twice in the past 8 months. Armenia has expressed its desire for peace talks to resolve the historic Nagorno-Karabakh dispute. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev have instructed their foreign ministers to begin preparations for peace talks between the two countries in wake of the possible peace talks. Nagorno-Karabakh is an area over which there is historical dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Let's look at our questions. Question 1. What are the reasons for considering BIMSTEC as an alternative to SAARC? How will India's involvement in BIMSTEC reduce China's edge in South Asia? Describe in detail. Why is the Sri Lankan economic crisis an opportunity for India? How does the Sri Lankan crisis affect India? Evaluate.